William Parmer joins me here today. You could learn what his team is up to by heading over to masterpassiveincome.com. And we're going to be a little all over the place. So, this is going to be a great primer for those people looking to get into real estate investing. So, really appreciate your time here today.
Absolutely. Happy to share.
Could we start on just a very truncated version of how you found your way into real estate investing, but more importantly, what those previous roles taught you and what you brought into real estate investing?
Oh man, great questions. Well, kind of got started in real estate in it had to be 2019. Before that, I was in the military. I spent just shy of 8 years in the Marine Corps. Did some active time and then some volunteer reserve time after that, and then transitioned to law enforcement. When I was in law enforcement, I basically ended up listening to a podcast. I was sitting in my car, and this was during COVID, and I was not really allowed to do the job with which I was just trained. So I was basically trying to find something else to do besides listen to music. My dad had bought real estate at one point or another. He didn't really benefit from it. So I figured, well, he probably did something wrong. So let's find out if there's a way to do this and do it right. And law enforcement doesn't make very much money. So I was trying to substitute my income with that. And in doing so, I pulled up Spotify and searched real estate podcast, and Dustin Heiner's Master Passive Income podcast was the first one on the list. And I really connected with him as an individual and him as like his program. He's a Christian like myself. He's married, has kids, and he started investing really so he could have replace his income with passive income so he wouldn't have to rely on a job to pay his bills and live life. And I really appreciated that. That really resonated with me. And after binging probably 200 episodes, I just realized that I qualified to be a student. And once I realized that, I was like, well, I'll reach out and see if he's taking on any more students. And he was. And from there, it just kind of grew. So,
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and it's happened to me a couple times. I can't imagine sitting down and listening to my 500 episodes or whatever it is, like in one shot like that. That's a lot of time commitment, but it sounded like you had that time to spend.
yeah, it was during COVID. Of course, we didn't know exactly how bad it was or anything like that. So we had to be cautious about what we got into. Roughly 10 out of 12 hours for a month or so or a little bit longer, I was not allowed to do very much unless it was a very serious situation. So I had a lot of time I could dedicate to it. So that's basically how I got started. And from there, I started reading a couple of books and educating myself further because I figured that was the best place to start was going to be education.
Right. So, what can you talk about that first real estate deal and what you learned from it?
Oh, yeah. Well, the first real estate deal, maybe I'll start with a little bit about how the coaching works because it was really great as far as starting because I live in an area that's pretty expensive and it's hard to buy rental properties for cash flow here. And that's what we focus on at Master Passive Income is buying cash flowing properties, not appreciation. Appreciation is great, but ultimately, if you have the cash flow and you're starting out, this is where we recommend people to start at first. He focuses on purchasing properties out of state, usually totally different location from where you live. And so I thought that was intriguing. And so I started there and I ended up buying my first one just south of Cleveland, Ohio. And up to that point, I had never set foot in the state of Ohio, much less Cleveland itself. And in the program, we just focus on how to purchase properties for cash flow and how to run the numbers, how to build the business first. We utilize property managers and realtors and inspectors, appraisers, et cetera, in order to purchase these properties without ever having gone there. The only reason that I know that I own that property, besides the fact that I get money incoming every month, is that the outside of the house got changed in color. And now that Google Maps is updated, it's changed color on Google Maps. So,
So, interesting, yet out of state investing, and that's the first one that you did.
mhm.
Do, do you suggest that if people are considering out of state investing like this, that they actually go? You mentioned it was the first time you had set foot in that state. Go boots on the ground, take a look at the area, see what you're getting yourself into?
So For this one, I actually had never been there. It took me 2 years before I actually went there to Ohio at all. So I'd owned it for 2 years before I ever went there. It's not really necessary for single family homes, in my opinion. It's not necessary at all. Really, what it comes down to is learning the area. And our biggest thing that we teach people is find a property manager before you ever buy a property. That's the biggest key to building your business in that area is you vet a property manager and you find several. Don't find just one. We want to find at least 3, if not 5 that we like. And then we basically rank them for favorites to least favorite, but people we would all work with if need be. So that way, if number 1 doesn't work out for whatever reason, you can quickly go to number 2 and not be stressed out trying to find a number 2.
Can you give a brief idea of what people should be looking for and what questions they should be asking?
Absolutely. There's a ton of questions that we have on our website that our students all get access to, but we add more, and each person over time ends up asking particular questions. But really, what you're asking a lot of questions about is their policies. What's your cancellation policy? Do you guarantee tenants? What's your lease up fee? Do you want 50% of first month's rent or 100% of first month's rent? How do you deal with evictions? Do you expect to be paid when the property is vacant because you haven't found a tenant? For one, that's a non starter for me. If it's not occupied and your job is to occupy it, I'm not going to pay you till it's occupied. And so there's some very basic ones, but we have 22 of those questions. And one of the more important ones when vetting is finding out the areas that these property managers like to manage properties. Because you may have one that will manage particular area and then you'll have one that'll manage another. But if they both say we're not going in this area, it's probably a good area to stay out of. There may be a lot of rentals in that area, but it may also mean if there's a ton of rentals that it's not really a prime area for you to be purchasing rental properties because it may be really hard to rent out. And they also are the ones that give you the best idea for what those properties are going to rent for. And that helps with running your numbers.
That's a really good tip, especially when you're trying to vet multiple property managers. That gives you more insight than probably anything else as to the locations to focus
Absolutely.
on.
And I tell people all the time when they have these conversations with property managers, don't be afraid to ask what you think is a dumb question. I tell students all the time, it doesn't matter. I still will start out new relationships with people, whether that be banks or property managers. I will say, hey, I'm going to ask you some questions, and some of them may seem dumb. So just bear with me. And my whole goal is to get them kind of laughing and enjoying the conversation with me because it helps build that rapport. And then you can just ask what you want to know. And people, if they especially are wanting your business, they're going to try to help you out because they're setting you up for success, hopefully with them.
You started in Ohio, but is there
Mhm.
any other markets that your team has identified that people should take a look at?
Oh, there's quite a few all over the states. Little Rock, Arkansas has been pretty good. There's Indiana, and the state as a whole is actually pretty decent. So I say the state as a whole, but you have to look for pockets. And once you figure that out, you find these little pockets inside of these states, it makes it a lot easier. And the tool we use to find these is actually just Zillow. It's nothing special, it's nothing crazy. We just use Zillow to find these areas, and we can get more in depth and detail with different platforms, et cetera. But Zillow is the one that we teach the most, and our students use it a lot to close properties.
Do you work with any turnkey providers?
Did have a couple of turnkey providers that we work with. We have one that's down in Birmingham. We might have one in St. Louis. I think one of them is Spartan Invest. And then there's another one that comes to mind, uh, but I cannot recall the name at the moment.
So, I hate to put you on the spot, but could you define the buy box then? What should people, especially if they're doing this for the first time, what is your team recommending that people should consider?
Absolutely. Happy to help with that. So, really, what we're looking for is very cookie cutter, very basic style houses. We're not looking for something extravagant. Generally, we want anywhere from 12 to 1,500 square feet, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, either a garage attached or detached. I personally avoid properties with swimming pools. I don't want that additional insurance cost. It's just not necessary. And then you deal with pool maintenance and more things like that. So, it's very basic. You just want to look for there's a lot you want a lot of that type of properties, nothing extravagant, no castles, no mansions, etc. But these are going to be single family properties that you're going to put in long-term leases, so think year long. Now, these will shift a little bit depending on where you are in the country. Like in Ohio, a 3-bed, 2-bath with an attached garage is actually not super common. A lot of times you're 3-bed, 1-bath with a detached garage. So you start to learn these things the more you look at these areas, but it shifts a little bit depending on the state that you're in.
So when it comes to the cash flow piece of it, so let's talk about that a little bit. Are you one of those proponents of the 1% rule? What type of cash flow are you trying to achieve?
So we like to shoot for 150 to $300 cash flow per door is what we like to shoot for. And the 1% rule I generally use for looking at, okay, is this going to be a good property for me to run their numbers on? I will look at properties that do not meet the 1% rule. I go into it knowing that there's a couple of factors that may change whether or not that will work, but mainly it's what is this thing actually going to make? The way that I kind of figure out without calling a property manager and setting up if it's a new area is I'll actually go just to the for rent tab on Zillow in the same area that I'm looking at, and I'll see, okay, what's a comparable property or a few couple comparable properties in this area that are renting for X, and then that's how I'll figure that out. But generally, the 1% rule is pretty good for how we get our students started.
Okay. Hey, you said 250 to $300. I'm guessing, is there a age of the property and amenities that you're looking for?
Actually, not necessarily. We have a couple students that have like a 1905, 1920. It really depends on the condition it is in. So you could get some that have been remodeled within the last 15 years or so. And if they have really good bones and the stuff is 15, 20 years old, it could still be a good rental for many years to come. The older it is, I would set aside a little more for capex, et cetera, maybe a little more in insurance. But if you do all of that and it still cash flows, then it could be a good property for you. But ultimately, these properties are going to come down to what does a property manager say? So if you're looking at this area as like a broad overview, if there's a lot of inventory and you're like, okay, these houses look good on first glance, well, maybe start looking into finding and hiring a property manager before you actually buy a property. So that way you don't end up with a property and then you rush around trying to find a property manager that doesn't want to do what you want to do because you didn't do your legwork first.
Just to remind everybody, head over to masterpassiveincome.com. That's masterpassiveincome.com. Learn how they can help you with this if you're looking to get into this real estate journey. And if you found some value in what we're talking about so far, do us a quick favor, share this with one of your investor friends. And if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a quick like and subscribe. It made me cringe a little bit just because I attempted out of state investing at one point and it bit me hard. It was
That's not
a
uncommon.
terrible experience. And one of the things is that I had wished I would have went into that market, met some of these people I was working with in person, including the property management. So that's where some of my questions are coming from.
Absolutely. And it's not uncommon. A lot of students we have had, and even as an investor, I've had people especially when I got started, say, "Oh man, you're going to lose so much money doing this. We lost tens of thousands of dollars trying to do this." But really, it's a system. And once you figure the system out, you just rinse and repeat constantly. Once you find something that works for you, just rinse and repeat. So that's the thing that Dustin Heiner has been able to build at Master Passive Income is a system that you can rinse and repeat constantly. And it just works pretty much everywhere you go. I've never seen anywhere it doesn't work. If it doesn't work in an area, it's mainly because there is no properties that actually will cash flow. But in my case, or in our students' cases, if that happens, that means you just need to look for another area of the country to invest.
Sure. And what I've also been learning too is that 250 to $300 per door for a single family home, that isn't much.
It's not an incredible amount. Obviously, we want to get our students with as much as possible. But if you get $250 a door per year, that's $3,000 a year. And we're setting money aside throughout the year for other expenses like vacancy rate, et cetera. So we have a calculator where you can punch these numbers in and it's very easy to understand. Obviously, we would prefer if everybody could get $500 a door, that would be phenomenal. And we would totally go for that anytime that happens. And it does happen. And so the thing is, once you get started and you built that business for one house, the second one usually comes pretty quickly after the first one.
Yeah. That's the case with everything too. I've talked to a lot of wholesalers, and I did wholesaling for quite a while as well. And there's something that flips in your
Mhm.
mind where you actually start to believe, "Oh, crap, this actually works."
Right.
And just because you believe it, now that because you've seen it, things start to come a lot easier.
Oh, I would totally agree with that. And one of the things that really helps when you start out, I'd love to hear your take and opinion on this, but I found that one of the things that really helped was getting in contact with the right people and being in the right rooms with other investors. If you're constantly hanging out with people that are saying you're going to lose lots of money doing this, well, you're going to start to believe that. So, my advice to anybody starting is one, get knowledge, read books, listen to podcasts, but hang out with people who are already doing it because that's going to start shifting your mindset to be able to actually do this.
Yeah, that old adage that you are the sum of the people you hang out with the most is
Right.
really true. And what I think is really interesting, especially in the real estate investing community, because I've been in all walks of business up until this point, the REI community is typically really welcoming and willing to share their
Absolutely.
knowledge. And there's a lot of pulling you up situations versus some competition.
Absolutely. And honestly, if I meet real estate investors that do not meet that criteria, so to speak, and they're not willing to share and they're not, then I don't really hang out with them very much just because they're not wanting to help other people, and it's pretty apparent. I'm one of those guys where if I know how to do something and I just figured it out, or I've been doing it for a little while and somebody comes to me and wants to know how to do something, even if they're investing in the area that I am investing in, doesn't matter. I will still help you do it because there's plenty of real estate to be bought and we need good investors to provide good homes for people that don't want to buy or just don't know how to buy. So we want to do that. And making sure people do it the right way is really important because we want people to succeed.
So now that you're coaching people and you're an instructor, what has been some of the bigger surprises you've run into?
The amount of questions that students ask, sometimes it's what you'll get an email and it's basically a small book. And you sit there and you try to read through it and you're like, man, this is going to take me 30 minutes to an hour to answer all these little tiny questions. But the fact that everybody seems to have problems with the same areas. Once you first get started, you're really concerned that I set up we set up an LLC. We don't usually hire that out. We have a website, a company that does that for us and so on, but they're really concerned about did I set it up right? And it's like, well, it's pretty basic. You can give them a phone call if you have any questions, but just that saying you can call that company and actually ask them. So, but generally people have problems with where do I find financing? How do I run the numbers? And these are all good questions. But I will say that Dustin has done a great job by having all of this stuff already mapped out in probably hundreds of hours of instructional videos that show you how to do everything. And we're there just to try to help people from making mistakes that are not in the videos that are like one-offs. Like we want people to succeed. So it is a little bit surprising how often everybody just gets caught up in the same particular areas when they start.
How has the coaching impacted your investing?
Well, if I hadn't paid for coaching, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be investing. I'm pretty sure. I was one of those guys starting out that, again, it makes me laugh because I was the one that was, man, I don't want to do this. I don't want to get this wrong because if I get this wrong, when you start out, like losing even $500 can be pretty painful. Now, it's not really something I think about too much. And I've realized that the more you get in investing, it's not that I'm not still wanting to spend my money wisely, but I'm more attuned to, okay, this risk is worth taking. Let's take this risk to find out if this is going to be a good property. It's been pretty great for me, and I love being able to help other students get started. And it's phenomenal every time they buy their first property or they have an awesome win underneath their belt. And yeah, just love being able to help people succeed.
So I'm sure that you've seen quite a bit of stuff now. Has you doing the coaching changed the way you've been doing your personal investing now?
Well, mine's taken an interesting track. So I teach single family homes. This is all I teach at Master Passive Income. But I am targeting more mobile home parks currently, which I ended up getting into one about I think it was about 3 years ago, and it was a fluke purchase, shall I say. And I ended up buying it and found out after I had bought it that I didn't know how to run the the numbers for it. I learned a lot about how to run the numbers for a commercial property, and particularly mobile home parks because they're so unique and they have so many every park is so different. So once I figured that out and I got it to where it was actually cash flowing, I realized, well, I wouldn't mind owning a couple more of these. And this was a smaller one. So I've kind of am leaning more in that direction currently, just personally speaking.
Hmm. So could you share a story of somebody you coached through, like beginning to end, where are they now, and some of the hurdles they might have experienced?
Well, let's see. Some of the hurdles come with I don't have enough money to start with. So we like our students to have 15 to 20,000 at least, 15 being the absolute minimum. Really 25 is a much better start. So that's usually one of the biggest first hurdles. And then once you buy your first property, where do you get the money for the second one? If you weren't able to do a completely successful burr on the property and pull all your money out, how do you get more? And then that turns into, okay, this is how you go about finding private money lenders to get your next property. So one of my favorite ones actually is a gentleman named Gary. And we met at a real estate conference, RubeCon, in 2020, and he wanted to be a student. And so I ended up coaching him. And this guy was, man, he was a hard charger. He just wanted to do it. Keep in mind, he's 70 years old and he started at 70, having never done this before. And he did it because his daughter had had their first grandson and she was having to work full time. And he didn't want her to have to do that. He wanted her to be able to raise their grandson without having to worry about money. So he took it on himself to start investing to provide that passive income for his daughter. And he started with a single family home. And then 30 days later, closed on a duplex. And then 4 months later, he was looking at a 25 or a 30 unit apartment complex. And I mean, this guy was rolling. He was blowing my mind, actually. It was so awesome to watch. We have another coach that coaches more of the multifamily space. And once he started getting into that, I was like, I can help you with this. I'm looking at buying this stuff myself. But because of how fast he was growing, we thought it would be best if we actually passed him off to the other coach where that's what he primarily does. Instead of staying with me, I wanted him to get moved to the other coach because he would be able to help him more faster. And it would be more beneficial for him to go to that other coach. So, as far as I know, he closed that 25 unit and has probably gone on to purchase more. But we have tons more students that do similar things actually once they get started.
Yeah, your program is the first one I've run into where you've divided and conquered when it comes to some of the students because you focus on the single family home. You got somebody else that helps with the multifamily. You're not reliant on a single guru, if you will.
Yeah, so Dustin, this is all his brainchild, but we realized after doing this for a while, we were only teaching single family homes. What happens when our students get into multifamily? What happens when they get into something that we are not teaching? We can't refer them to somebody because we haven't been through this other person's program. So, uh, this guy is still in the process of building his multifamily teaching course, but he was like, "Well, I can help him out right now." So we just moved him over there. So we're not only doing single family home, we're looking at we are I think he's almost done or he's in the process of building out the coaching for multifamily. And then we're looking at bringing on another guy that does note investing and some more advanced strategies because that's what he is super familiar with. And so we're trying to make this more of a come learn, almost like a one-stop shop for real estate.
One of the things that really stood out is that you're talking about that one person who's 70, and it's interesting how some people will take that massive action,
Mhm.
implement, and get it going versus sitting on it and considering it, and that it does take that massive action. You actually have to do something.
It really does. And it's like you have to, some people are like, I have a couple of students that are like myself, but for me, when I got started, I sold a truck and I sold some extra stuff and got, I think it was $22,500 in cash. And I took the cash and put it on the table with a lighter and told my wife, like, we can burn all of this right now and it won't affect us at all. Or we can go buy a house and try this real estate thing. And she was like, well, I guess we should probably not burn it and try to do something with it. It's just grown. And for everybody like wanting to start doing this, start with knowledge, gain as much knowledge and information as possible. But when it comes to getting your spouse on board, the proof is really in the pudding. I think it was probably a year and a half into doing this. And then one night she said she had a dream that her brother or somebody, one of our family members, bought a house. And the first question out of her mouth was, what was your interest rate? And as soon as she said that, I knew I had her hook, line, and sinker. And so now she doesn't question it, doesn't think about it at all ever, and just lets me go and do my thing.
Yeah, it's really important to get your SO on board when it comes to this type of thing. I mean,
Abs-
it just helps. It's part of the one of the five. You're hanging around with that person all the
Mhm.
time. They need to be supportive, and they need to
Absolutely.
believe in it as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So before we jump into the rapid fire questions, I got
Hit me with them.
two potential students. What do you do to show them that going into this training is as much of an investment as the property they're buying versus an expense?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, think about it this way. Would you rather go forth and try to do something and not have somebody there like pulling the bumpers up when you go bowling, when you take your kids bowling? If you don't pull the bumpers up, then they're going to get gutter balls left and right. And those gutter balls in real estate would be losing massive amounts of money because of bad decisions. If you can have somebody pull those gutters up or pull those rails up, it may take you a couple hits on the rails to get that ball down the lane, but it's going to get down the lane and you're going to have a lot less heartache along the way. I know that if I hadn't had a coach to get started, there's no way I would be doing this. I'd be really timid about spending tens of thousands of dollars. So I think it's monumentally important to have coaches and mentors and be with the right people that are in doing the things that you want to be doing.
This is one of those things that is always stuck with me is the concept that when you're working with a team such as yours, it's almost like somebody buying a franchise. You're getting the processes, procedures, the infrastructure in place that somebody's going to have to try to piecemeal together on their own. And that is way more time consuming than people realize.
So much more. And that's the great thing about master passive income is once you're a student, you get lifetime access to the portal with all the information. You also get the updates and all the additional videos and bonus material. So once you become a student, and the coaching lasts for 6 months, so it's not an incredibly long time, but it's not short either.
Well, William, is there a question or concept, anything we should have tried to cover in this main meat of the episode?
I don't know about strategy or concept, but I'll say that when you start investing in real estate and you're just trying to figure out which area of real estate you want to invest in, don't rush into one particularly. Learn about each one and figure out which one you are most comfortable with. Because once you get started, it's pretty easy to shift into another one when you're ready to do that. Now, I will give a caution. Don't get shiny object syndrome where you're like, "Oh, I wanna do this." Try not to get shiny object syndrome. Once you get one, buckle down and do that until you're good at it and you don't really have to think about it anymore. And then take a look at, okay, do I wanna get into anything else? The answer may be no on either one of those. So take that and evaluate that.
No, that's really important. That's great feedback. And it goes to the whole there's niches, riches in the niches situation. That even
Absolutely.
it's included in this. So this has been fantastic, William. You brought a great amount of value here so far. But if you're ready, we'll jump into the rapid fire questions and close this
Absolutely.
episode out.
Yeah.
But before we do, I'm going to remind everybody one more time, masterpassiveincome.com. That's massivepassiveincome.com. Take advantage of those resources there. And if you're ready, William, we'll jump right in.
Let's do it.
What lie do real estate investors sometimes tell themselves?
I'm running out of money. That's a big one right off the bat is I'm running out of money. So private money going to friends and family that maybe could lend you some money. I will say when you do this, just make sure that you are doing everything with the contract and it is notarized, signed, etc. So don't do it on a handshake. It doesn't matter if it's your parents that are giving you 20 grand or whatever it is. Do it with a contract, go through a lawyer, do all that jazz the right way.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Start right now. Absolutely. If I'd have started this when I was 20, I have no idea where I would be now. I get super excited because if they start buying as soon as they are legally allowed to, and they are hanging out with the right people, they're getting coaches, etc., the sky is literally the limit on what they could do with that. They could grow it as much as they want, or just have enough to where it handles their monthly income, and that's it. So start right now.
Do you have a book recommendation?
Oh, right. Lots of good books. The Purple Bible for everybody is Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Absolutely is a mind opener. Along with that one, I read, I'm going to give a shout out to Dustin Heiner, is How to Quit Your Job with Rental Properties by Dustin Heiner. It's a great book. I think he has 3 different books out now. The Richest Man in Babylon is an excellent book. I even listen to that one on Audible every once in a while just to keep it fresh in my mind. That's a fantastic one. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill is one that I'm reading currently.
And then finally, what single strategy, process, or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time saving impact to you or your business?
This is an excellent one, and it is understanding the 80/20 rule. So 100% of the day has to happen. And generally speaking, there's only about 20% of that day where you're truly very efficient and you're doing something that you like doing. Well, the other 80% still has to happen. So, what would happen if you hire or delegate the other 80% out to somebody else where that other 80% is their 20% and they can do it without thinking about it? And it's much more efficient. So, Monday evening, I spoke at a real estate conference, just a monthly meetup. And I needed to have a presentation, and I do not like building presentations. It takes a very long time for me, and I don't enjoy it. And so a friend of mine said, "Well, I use somebody on Fiverr." And it was very easy to come up with the content, but it was creating the document that I did not enjoy. And so I hired that done, and it was a phenomenal experience, and I didn't have to think about it. So it really was great for me to be able to do that.
Well, William, this was fantastic. One last time, it is masterpassiveincome.com, masterpassiveincome.com. Those are going to be clickable links in the show notes, but really appreciate your time. This was great.
I'm very excited to have been here, and thanks for having me on.